This podcast is not meant to be professional advice of any kind. It is meant to be informative and entertaining. If you make any changes to your life, see the appropriate professional before you do so. Welcome to Super Age. My name's David Stewart. I am the founder of Ageist and your host on the Super Age Show. We talk about how to live healthier, how to live longer, and how to be happier. And who doesn't want that? Today's show is brought to you by Inside Tracker, the dashboard to your inner health. Go to insidetracker.com/ageist, save 20% on all their products. Today's show is also brought to you by Element, LMNT. My favorite electrolyte mix. It's what I put in my water in the morning, and it's what I put in my water at the gym. Go to drinkelement.com/ageist and receive a free 8-serving sample pack with any purchase. Today's show is also brought to you by Timeline Nutrition with their breakthrough product, MitoPure, the first clinically tested urolithin A supplement, which is showing tremendous results for mitochondrial health. Go to timelinenutrition.com/ageist, use the code ageist at checkout, and save 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Welcome to episode 139 of the Super Age podcast. It's great to have you with us. This will be dropping on June the 21st, 2023. It is a glorious late spring, early summer day here in the mountains of Park City. And I'm thinking about vacation. We're going to go away for about 4 days next week. I'm excited about that. And I just want to put a plug in for vacations. If you've got vacation time, take it. How many more vacations are you going to have, right? And think about going somewhere that's meaningful to you. You know, maybe it's friends or family or someplace you've always wanted to go. Because I've started looking at, so I'm 64, so how many more summer vacations am I going to have? I don't know. It's not endless. So I'm trying to make each one I do count and do things that are memorable and also relaxing and rejuvenating. And I'm encouraging all of you to do the same. This week on the show, we have Stephen Munatones. And Stephen is the CEO of a company called Kaatsu. Now, I just want to say I'm not affiliated with this company in any way. They did send me some demo models so I can check them out and have some understanding of how this technology works. I first saw this maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And Kaatsu is a technology they're bands that go across, that go on your arms or on your legs. And what they do is they temporarily restrict the venous blood flow in your limbs. And not to be confused with things you see on Amazon that are called BFR bands, blood flow restriction bands, that are more like tourniquets. And be careful with those, is all I got to say. And I've seen these on a few people over the years, and I thought the technology was super interesting. And then I saw them on my friend Zora, who does the Hack My Age podcast, and she's got a great Instagram feed. And I saw them on her, and the utility that she had gotten out of them, and this sort of amazing changes that had happened to her. And what I recall was she had a hip problem, so she couldn't really exercise, and she wore the bands for 20 minutes a day on their lowest setting. And not only didn't she lose muscle mass, she gained 1%, which I thought was extraordinary. So I think this technology is super interesting. It was originally developed for the elderly in Japan. And I think that, you know, as some of us are getting like hip replacements or knee replacements, or we have an injury, one of the biggest concerns as we get older is losing muscle mass or losing bone density. And that is a real problem. If you have something like a hip replacement, you could be losing muscle mass. You may never get that back. So this technology allows for that to happen, and it's super, super gentle. Before I had Stephen on the show, he sent me, and I'm not exaggerating, like hundreds and hundreds of pages of scientific documentation on this, about how it's been tested in the elderly population in Japan for, I believe, like the last 15 years. Seems incredibly safe. And now it's used, they use it here in the Olympic Center. My physical therapist uses them. You see, if you go on Instagram, you probably see like bodybuilders using them. That's not why I use them. But I really wanted to bring this to everybody's attention, that should you have an injury, especially at our age, it can be extremely difficult to recover from it. It's not like we're 19 anymore. It takes a while. And these this technology, because of the way it works, and I'm going to let Stephen explain it a little more, I think is really helpful. So really looking forward to having Stephen coming on. He can explain this much better than I can. I will say I've been using him for the last maybe 3 weeks. Took a little getting used to. It's a very different way of exercising than I'm used to, but much more gentle in a way. So we're going to bring Stephen on in just a moment after a quick word from our sponsors. The first sponsor of today's show is Timeline Nutrition with their breakthrough product, MitoPure. We all know how important mitochondrial energy is, and especially maintaining muscle and strength as we age. Urolithin A, which is found in MitoPure, has been clinically proven to increase muscle strength and endurance with no other changes in lifestyle. Urolithin A is essentially upgrading your body's cellular power grid, giving your body the energy it needs to optimize. I've been using MitoPure for a few months now, and what I can tell you is there is a noticeable change in the way my muscles re-energize after I use them. What that means is, say I'm involved in some intense activity in the gym or maybe some sporting activity. Normally, the next time I did it, I would be, kind of tired. I would be sort of gassed out. That doesn't seem to happen with this. And all I can imagine is because my mitochondrial grid has essentially been upgraded, it's not just my muscles that are getting upgraded, it's all the other cells in my body because they're all powered by mitochondria. Go to timelinenutrition.com/ageist, use the code ageist at checkout, and save 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Today's show is also brought to you by Element, spelled LMNT, my favorite electrolyte mix. One of the great findings that I learned last year was the importance of electrolytes in my water, especially sodium. Of course, if you have hypertension or you're pre-hypertensive, this is something you want to pay attention to. But for most of us, we're probably lacking electrolytes. And my favorite one is Element. And guess what? They just launched grapefruit. So I'm actually drinking a Element grapefruit right now. And it's awesome. Go to drinkelement.com/ageist. Get a free 8-serving sample pack. That's DRINKLMNT.com/ageist. And get a free 8-serving sample pack with your next purchase. Just a quick reminder, after my conversation with Stephen Munatones, we're going to do that thing that we do every week called Just Try This at the end of the conversation. So stay tuned for that. Let's get in touch with Stephen right now. Hey, Stephen, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much. And you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Although I'm sore because my idea of a fun day is I go to the gym and I do like personal max workouts.
Got it.
So you're an expert on something called BFR, which is blood flow resistance training, and specifically Kaatsu, which seems to be what the people in the know use, which is quite different than just putting a belt around your leg. So, but I want to understand a little bit about your story. You were a swimmer.
Yes, I still swim. I played water polo and swam, and did all kinds of stuff in the ocean as a kid growing up in Southern California. And I was fortunate to represent the U.S. at a World Championships, both as an athlete and then as a coach and translator, and you name it. I just love the healthful aspect of swimming in all regards.
And you recently got back into it.
Yes. So I had a heart attack, what they call widowmaker, back in 2016. It caught me completely off guard. And when I woke up from the induced coma, I said to myself, I put my family through some agony, and I needed to get back to myself so I can at least swim at length across the pool. And over the last 2 years, I've participated in a race called SCAR. It's about a 40-mile race, and it brings together all the top channel and marathon swimmers around the world. And I jumped in and I was able to complete it. So I'm back.
You swam 40 miles.
Correct.
40.
40. So 60 kilometers or so. Yeah.
Okay. That's a really long way. What did I say?
Yeah, so I can swim for a long period of time. And I did that using Kaatsu, using our own technology in order to build up my body muscularly and vascularly to able to achieve that, even though, years ago I was flat in the CCU with, life support. I just wanted to prove to myself, but also I wanted to test the extent of what our technology can do for the human body.
Let's start to the origin of Kaatsu. I know it's Japan, tremendous amount of studies on an elderly population.
Correct.
What was the idea there?
So Dr. Sato, he's the inventor of Kaatsu, a very quiet, unassuming man. If you went to Tokyo, you couldn't pick him out from anybody. However, back in 1966, he was sitting on the heels in a Buddhist ceremony, and he noticed that his calves were very, very tight, as a lot of people do. So he started massaging his calves, and he felt how pumped up they were. At the time, he thought because blood wasn't going into his lower extremity, he thought that's why his calves felt pumped up. And at the time, he was a power lifter, and he liked that feeling of getting pumped up. And so over the next 7 years, he used bicycle tubes, and he put them around his arms, his legs, his waist, his head, you name it, testing out how could he replicate this phenomena of having a pumped up muscle. And it was over the course of the decades that he finally came up with the methodology and the equipment that we now know of Kaatsu.
Okay, so just a disclaimer here. Do not take a bicycle tube and wrap it around an extremity and shut your blood off. That's a really bad idea.
Very bad idea. And Dr. Sato did all of that self-experimentation. He did all the hard stuff. So when I first met Dr. Sato in 2001, it was part of the 22nd Century Project of Japan. The 22nd Project of Japan was a government and private sector collaboration looking forward 100 years in the future. And their goal, again, a thought experiment, but a ambitious goal. What technologies did they have to develop now in order for this aging Japanese population to be as resilient, as strong, as healthy as possible 100 years from now? And Kaatsu was part of that project.
And so what? So we've got this guy who's a power lifter.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about an elderly population in Japan. Yeah. Help me out there. How did we get from A to B?
Okay, so A to B actually took 30 years. So it wasn't a revolutionary jump. It was an evolutionary understanding of what Kaatsu was doing. Initially, again, as a young man, he was more interested as a competitive bodybuilder in getting stronger. That was his initial goal. But as he understood and as he was joined by more and more Japanese researchers, scientists, physicians, and the physicians mainly came from the cardiovascular or the cardiology practice, they understood that the real core of building the muscle was actually building the resiliency, the elasticity, the strengthening of the vascular tissue. And that is the core of Kaatsu. It's if we Google Kaatsu or Google BFR, we'll get many YouTube videos or Instagram posts or Facebook messages on young people lifting enormous amount of weight and with very ripped muscles. That is a very, very small subset of really the vision that Dr. Sato had, which was a healthy lifestyle based on improving the elasticity of the vascular tissue. And so that process took 30 years of his own self-experimentation. And then the last 20 odd years have been a very focused research project, numerable research projects on very specific examples and protocols of Kaatsu to achieve very specific purposes.
And I just want to say, usually for these podcasts, I try and inform myself. You sent me an ocean of data, like hundreds of these articles on the effects of Kaatsu. So let's help people out here. What are we doing?
Okay. So we have these simple bands, and I have a band on my arm here, and I only put it on one arm. And I'm going to take the other band and I want to compare it to a blood pressure cuff. So this is a blood pressure cuff. You can see how wide it is compared to this band. And this band inflates every 30 seconds. And so the circumference gets smaller to a certain bit. And it does that according to very, very precise algorithm that Dr. Sato and the cardiologist set for everybody from low pressure to high pressure. The effect of the equipment is you can see it on my hand. This is my normal color of the palm of my hand. I don't have a band here. I have an inflated band every 30 seconds on this side. What's happening is the blood, the arterial flow continues unimpeded, and the venous flow is modified every 30 seconds. So the band is inflated, the circumference is gained smaller for 30 seconds, and then it's released for 5 seconds. And that is at an incremental increase. And I can keep these bands on for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever I want. But the effect is that I get an engorgement of blood in the limbs, whether it's my arms or legs. And you can see on both sides, this is my normal arm without the Kaatsu on. This is my arm with the bands on. So you see the vein distension, you see the darker coloring, which is an indication that the blood is being engorged into very, very small capillaries of the hand. That's what the equipment does. And the effect of this, even when I'm talking to you and using my hand motion, is on a cellular level, this arm is exercising. It's exercising a lot. Not only, you can't see it obviously, but this arm feels pumped up as if I was doing bicep curls or some kind of push-ups. This arm is at homeostasis. It's regular. And so we use these bands as a catalyst to create an engorgement of blood in the limbs. And then that is the kickstarter to a variety of hormonal and metabolic responses in the body that it's natural. It does what the body is intended to do. Okay.
Let's go through all of the, all the things that happen here, because there's a lot.
Yes.
From the top,
okay.
What's happening here?
So right now, there's a lot of blood in this hand. You see the veins are dilated, bigger. And with every heartbeat, dun, 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 on this hand, you have a release of nitric oxide, VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. When I do movement, and the movement can be simply moving my hand, it could be push-ups, but it could be typing on a computer or sending a text. Any kind of micro movement will then lead to a lactate buildup. It's not a massive lactate that you probably felt when you hit it hard in the gym, but it's a mild and sustained lactate buildup. That lactate is communicated through our central nervous system up to our brain, and then our brain reacts normally. When you were when you were maxing out on the weights at the gym, the body physiologically did the same as my body is doing now. And so the lactate is the stress, the metabolic stress on my muscles, in this case, my right arm, my bicep, my tricep, and my forearm, is being communicated to the brain. And then the brain, through the pituitary gland, is actually releasing human growth hormone. Human growth hormone is a big molecule. And with that comes a variety of additional compounds, elements, metabolites, from IGF-1 to BDNF to adrenaline to beta endorphins. And depending on the time under tension, depending on the amount of pressure, and depending on what movements you do. So if someone has tendinitis, they would do a different pressure, a different time, a different motion than someone, let's say a collegiate punter who is trying to increase his leg strength. He would be doing something different than the pianist who is just trying to get a piece correct, or a baseball player, a pitcher who is trying to learn a new pitch. So you have the equipment. It's a kickstarter to to process within the vascular tissue and within the brain. And then how we move the body, what the different pressures are, and the time will affect different changes of the body. So complicated, long answer to a very short question.
I'm going to dive into a lot of this, but let's help people out with some use cases here.
Okay.
So there's a lot of information out there on elderly people who have mobility issues, especially women. I think there was a lot of the data is on women. So say I'm a 70-year-old woman, I have some muscle loss, I've got bone loss, I'm concerned about these things. I'm not going to go to the gym and take up powerlifting. And how would this be used?
Okay. So it's actually used very simply, which means it's sort of difficult to grasp. So we will take that 70-year-old woman, she's experiencing sarcopenia, and perhaps she has other aches and pains in her body. What we would recommend to her is she puts on the bands in the morning. She could be preparing her breakfast. She could be washing her face. She could be brushing her teeth. She could be cleaning the countertop in her kitchen. She could be folding clothes. During all of those things that she would normally do anyway, put the bands on at low pressure. The same pumped up feeling that you feel in the gym, the same pumped up feeling that I'm feeling now, because her muscle mass isn't as large, she won't get that same amount of pumped up feeling, but in fact, her muscles will be exercised more than normal. If she's folding clothes, she's moving her muscles. That is a form of exercise. If she wants to amplify that effect, she would put on the Kaatsu bands and go through a variety of things. So when Dr. Sato and I were discussing how do we actually introduce this to the world, we were thinking, not everybody's going to be someone like you, your age going into gym and hitting it hard. In fact, most people will not. Most people will just carry on with their life, gradually increasing their sedentary lifestyle over time, watching more TV, reading a book, not going out on a skateboard or playing basketball or going to the gym. So we had to think about the protocols that 70-year-old woman would follow on a daily basis. And therefore, we came up with these bands, with the controller units, with the algorithms, so she can feel comfortable putting on the bands and seeing the effects of Kaatsu, which is a massive dose of human growth hormone, as one example, but also of a beta endorphin, a pain mitigator, which maybe she, in addition to the sarcopenia that she's experiencing, maybe she just has an old knee injury. It just makes her limp. So we would teach her the different protocols, both on her arms and her legs, and if she wants the core, in order to help her particular conditions.
Okay. So she does this, and say she goes for walks and, doesn't really do anything too strenuous. What is the change after, let's just say, like 3 months?
Her muscle tone after 3 months will significantly improve, significantly. So if she's 70 years old, her tricep muscle is probably fairly small. She probably doesn't exercise it much. We teach her various things. When you are going for the walk, just open and close your hand when you have the Kaatsu bands on. When you're, doing a variety of things, do these motions. And what happens is, like I explained in the beginning, her vascular tissue becomes more elastic. That leads to a hormonal response. The hormonal response will give her the HGH that she normally would not get. She would get a small amount. I mean, if you're walking upstairs, you're going for an hour walk, you do generate some. But with Kaatsu, it's simply a way to amplify that to a significant degree. And therefore, you do that on a daily basis. You get this daily dose or twice daily dose of HGH. And the effects of the body are very apparent for anybody, especially the older you get. Just aesthetically, you'll just see how the muscle becomes more toned. And our oldest user is 104 years old. We have another user who's 95 in Hawaii. And the same thing, they just want to continue a quality of life. They want to be able to open up a jar, any jar. They want to be able to wash their hair easily. They want to sweep around their house. And just holding a broom or handling these things, they need to maintain their muscle mass. And they do it doing the daily activities with Kaatsu.
Okay, another use case. 60 years old, knee replacement or hip replacement happens often,
Yeah.
Which is going to cause someone to have not be able to move around too much and lose muscle. And as we know, it's losing muscle happens so fast and gaining it is really hard. How would you use this?
Yes. So post-surgical patients are great for us. Absolutely great because they're immobile. Maybe they have a cast on, maybe they have a brace on, maybe they were informed by their orthopedic surgeon, don't do XYZ. So suddenly a person with especially a lower extremity injury and that surgery, they're not walking, they're not getting up. I mean, they're trying, their physical therapists are encouraging them to walk, but they're not walking much. As they do their physical therapy, as they are at their house, they can put the bands on, again, pressure on, pressure off, pressure on, pressure off. And it creates this phenomenon, this condition in their lower extremity. We have seen time and time again, and it's very well documented, whether you're a Boston Red Sox or a New England Patriot or a Navy SEAL, where the cast is taken off, or the brace is taken off, or they've rehabilitated enough to be mobile, they have zero atrophy in the muscle that they just had the surgery on. And that obviously, you're not starting from ground zero. So normally you would have atrophy, especially in the lower body. And then all of a sudden, now your gait is impacted. Now your stamina is impacted. And we've demonstrated again, time and time again with professional athletes or with soldiers that doing Kaatsu twice a day regularly while you're sitting at their home or at the PT clinic, pressure on, pressure off, doing minimal movement, whether it's just curling your toes or squeezing your glutes or squeezing tennis balls, that will lead to elimination of muscle atrophy.
Let's go to another use case. So someone who's, I'll call myself semi-well trained.
Okay.
So how would I use this in the workouts that I do?
Okay. So what particular exercise do you like? What's your favorite? Is it bench press, shoulder press, leg press? What is your favorite?
So my sport is ski racing.
Okay.
And the muscles that always fail, like the fail points on me are my glute med, my quad, and surprising my obliques. My obliques just like kill me.
Okay. Do you have access to a quad mill? Those machines that you put both feet on and it moves, trying to replicate the up and down of a hill. If you don't, it's okay.
I don't think I've ever seen one of these.
Okay. So, well, many of our users are actually Olympic skiers. So I've seen this thing, but so let's just take a very simple example. You don't have any access to anything. You would put the leg bands on, again, do the psycho mode, and you can do what we call quarter squats. So just not at 90 degrees, but at 45 degrees squat and continue to move. So you don't want to lock out your knees. So there's a continuous stress on the glutes, the hamstrings, and the quads. You would do 4 sets of those at increasing pressure. And let's say you would able to do 60 reps on the first set. You take no more than 20 seconds rest and you do a second set. Most likely, in most people, they go from 60 reps in the first set to something like 20 to 30 reps on the second set. Take no more than 20 seconds rest, do the third set. Again, the number of reps falls. And the last set, you would probably do anywhere from 1 to 3 sets. The lactate that you would build up in that 4-set exercise with decreasing repetitions, only having 20 seconds rest in between, is a tremendous amount of lactate. Let's say your lactate was normally 8 millimoles. It would be 12 or more. It would feel like you do it the last quarter of a race when you're down the hill and you're just carving in and out and your thighs are burning. What we call that race pain. For competitive athletes, what we do, so they can be accustomed to that pain threshold that we all hit, whether we're swimming, running, jumping, whatever we're doing, athletes always get to that pain threshold where they know mentally they have to work through it. They have to manage themselves psychologically. So physiologically, you would have the same beautiful technique going down the hill in the last quarter of the hill versus the first half of the hill. And so to do that, we actually introduce something the concept we call race pain, that you can do simply with quarter squats. Those quarter squats, you do 4 repetitions. You could do it twice a day. You could do it once a day. You could do it after a weight training workout. You could do it after a session on the hill, on the mountains. So whatever you do, we want your body to understand that lactate, that deluge of lactate is going to come, and how can you mentally handle that discomfort and then continue to ski with the best technique possible. And this is one of the ways we use it.
So at the end of my normal workout, I'm like, okay, I'm going to torture myself here a little bit because this sounds, what you're describing to me sounds super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Which is a very different experience than what we talked about with the 70-year-old woman.
Absolutely.
She's probably not going to notice this at all.
No. So that's the beauty of Kaatsu. It's just the equipment is one aspect of Kaatsu. The equipment only actually serves to create this engorgement of blood in the limbs, and then the body takes over from that point on. Now, if you're a competitive ski racer, you're going to want to push your body in certain directions. Whether you're a 70-year-old woman facing sarcopenia, you have completely different goals. And how you achieve, getting faster and better on the ski slopes is drastically different than trying to reverse sarcopenia. And so the second part of Kaatsu are these protocols, of which, fortunately, here in the United States, we have, tens of thousands of people using Kaatsu, all different walks of life, all different ages. And because Dr. Sato and the cardiologist had done all this previous work at this, just figuring out the different protocols that are appropriate for different people, we have this huge just book of protocols. And when people call us and say, I was a former athlete, I had a knee replacement, and I want to do this, we have a protocol for them. And the good thing about Dr. Sato is in 1988, so at the Seoul Olympics, the Japanese athletes of all the track and field athletes, the skiers, the jumpers, the ice skaters, the volleyball players, they were all using Kaatsu with different protocols. So Dr. Sato provided them the equipment, provided them with the principles, and then each sport and each activity came up and devised different modalities, different applications for that. And that's how we just absorbed all that information and then try to explain it to people outside of Japan.
Okay. I got so many questions here. So you mentioned that there's a lot of work involved with cardiologists.
Yes.
And what we're doing is we're restricting blood flow temporarily at some rhythm. How is this? Let's talk about the cardiovascular effect.
Okay.
So if I were to do some form of Kaatsu, how will this affect things like my VO2 max? Will that have an effect on it?
Yes. So we proved this not only in Japan, but when we came to the United States, again, Americans, rightly so, were disbelieving of the information we had, because fundamentally, Kaatsu is about increasing that elasticity of the vascular tissue. And you as a competitive ski racer, or people who run, swim, row, etc., boxers, you name it, they understand if they can increase that elasticity of the vascular tissue, that blood circulation is not only going to be improved, But as you're competing, as you're moving, as you're training, then the removal of the lactate will be faster and better. So your pain threshold for a longer period of time will be improved. And so the Japanese cardiologists, they weren't dealing with the elite athletes. That was Dr. Sato and orthopedic surgeons, internists, et cetera. That was their thing. The cardiologists were focused on people who had heart attacks, strokes, and different other cardiac issues. They were simply trying to get this person to return back to a normal status of life. So between 2004 and 2014, that 10-year period, Dr. Sato, Dr. Nakajima, Dr. Morita, some of the leading cardiologists in Japan, they did a study of over 12,000 patients, mostly elderly, including 2,000 patients of theirs who had cardiac issues. And there they used the Kaatsu bands on their arms and legs. This is the protocols that we currently use now, whether you did have a heart attack or whether you are a competitive Olympic athlete. It's the same principles, the same protocols, because at the end of the day, we're making that vascular tissue more elastic, allowing the blood flow to be more efficient. And especially for those who have neuropathic pain, amputees, and disabled individuals, you want that blood flow to improve, get better, so you can use your muscles more effectively, or you can even just walk.
Does this have the practical effect of increasing things like VO2 max or aerobic fitness?
When I came over here and I was explaining it, at Lackland Air Force Base, under the supervision of Texas A&M researchers, they actually took soldiers, 12 soldiers, the special forces. I can't go into too many details. And they actually did for 3 weeks only walking. That's all they did. So we know of our special forces as soldiers who really push themselves daily. I mean, they're running, they're lifting things, they're carrying things, they're in the weight room, they're really pushing themselves. For 3 weeks, we had these soldiers, tactical athletes, using the Kaatsu bands only on a treadmill, walking at a comfortable pace for 20 minutes. That's all they did. So they stopped all their training, went to the testing lab, and then all they did was the walking on the treadmill, comfortable pace, with the bands on, pressure off. 3 weeks later, they tested their VO2 max and they tested their 1.5 mile run time. So two things. Mm-hmm. Their VO2 max increased, and all of the men, very surprising to the researchers, not surprising to us, they did their lifetime best on 1.5 miles after 3 weeks of Kaatsu training. That demonstrated to the military that they can actually maintain the cardiovascular fitness, that their stamina of their soldiers, in the case, and we're not advocating that the soldiers don't train. We're saying that if you have an injury, if you are somehow maybe on vacation or, leave, whatever, rest and recuperation, you can actually do Kaatsu walking in the park, just walking your dog, whatever you want to do, and you can maintain that vascular elasticity, your VO2 max, and hopefully when you get back to the base or wherever you're being stationed, to have that maintenance of your former stamina.
Do you have any numbers on that? What was the increase in the VO2 max?
I don't want to. I have the paper.
More or less.
I don't want to say 3%, and then all of a sudden it's not 3%. Okay. I don't want to say 1.5 because I don't remember. But the paper was really a seminal paper in terms of looking how Kaatsu can help people who are immobile or simply want, for whatever reason, have a lower level of activity.
So my guess is the subset of this audience listening to this who are in special forces is very small. However, I'm guessing that there are quite a few people listening to this who, I know for myself, as I get a little older, my toes get cold in the winter and my fingers get cold, which has to do with, I'm guessing, vascular elasticity. Talk to me about BFR and that.
Yes, and that is especially for older people and we're talking, perhaps your parents and my parents, so people really in their 80s and 90s, this is a huge issue. And again, because of, assumed mobility issues, I just took the bands off, but you saw how my fingertips,
they were pink,
nice and rosy red. That's the same effect would be on our toes. And we get this time and time again. And where literally the elasticity of those capillaries at the end of our toes or fingertips simply is reduced over time, over the lifetime. We want that pliability, that elasticity to return. You can only do that by either very vigorous exercise, which is unlikely if you're 80 or 90 years old, or Kaatsu, that is literally shoving blood into those very small capillaries with every heartbeat. And so we've done this, time and time again. And I think the real proof in the pudding is when we're dealing with amputees. So amputees, their residual limb, quite often they've got neuropathic pain, they've got phantom pain. In addition, where they're the surgery or where they're wearing a prosthetic, the ends of their residual limb are medically cut off. We want those, in addition, for those men and women who don't have their fingers and toes, we want the end of their residual stump to be as vascularly healthy as possible. And it's been really, really humbling for us to be able to offer this to those individuals. And, we work with Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Green Berets, Air Force Special Forces, et cetera. And, these are the men. I apologize. Our females are not in the Special Forces yet, but these are the people who are facing tremendous physical challenges. The average Navy SEAL has 7 orthopedic surgeries during his career. These individuals who are sacrificing a lot, they put themselves through great risk, coming back and be able to help them recover as quickly and as best as possible is a huge motivation for people in our company.
One of the things is, as we get a little older, we have 2 types of muscle. There's slow twitch and fast twitch. And as we know, one at a considerable age can still run a marathon, but something like a 100-meter dash becomes way more challenging because the fast twitch seems to go away faster. Talk to me a little bit about the implication of, can we increase fast twitch muscle?
Yeah. Yes. So it's actually quite simple. So when that muscle is being engorged in blood and that lactate is building, you're able to continue moving the muscle slowly, but in terms of speed, it's less so. However, metabolically speaking, that those fast twitch muscles are being worked in a very abbreviated time. So let me give you a practical example. Let's say we have a 100-meter dash sprinter. Now, their legs are pumping at a certain speed and their arm is pumping at a certain speed. Somebody like Usain Bolt is the epitome of that extremely exact, precise coordination between his upper body and his lower body. It's going exactly the same. For those who aren't as fast or as talented as Usain Bolt, we have to work on that. We have to work on that speed. So if we know we're a leg-driven or leg-dominant athlete or an arm-dominant athlete, then what we do is we put the bands on the athlete or anybody of any age, and we actually have them move their muscle as they're standing as quickly as they do with without Kaatsu on. When they do that, they're building up lactate, but at the same time, both the fast twitch and mostly the fast twitch muscles are being activated. Same thing as you were doing with that we recommended you doing the quarter squats. For the sprinters or anybody who wants to increase their speed, like a golfer with club head speed, like a baseball batter with their batting speed, like a swimmer, runner, a rower, when they say, when the gun goes off, you want to have the fastest reaction time as possible. We do that while the muscle is engorged in blood. And that teaches the body, or puts a stress on the body that enables this fast twitch muscles to be developed in training. Now, how does that work for that 70-year-old who's facing sarcopenia? Well, for her, if she trips on something, walking on a sidewalk, or maybe her dog had a ball in the living room, and she stumbles on that, when she was younger, she would have the speed, the reaction time to prevent from falling over. So with older people, it's also a very critical thing that we're working on, is that we are, standing, sitting, standing, sitting, standing, sitting, et cetera. In the same way we're teaching that sprinter to go fast, we're teaching the older person, when you might trip, the last thing we want is them to fall and break a bone. If they can catch themselves, with that fast twitch muscle, because that's the fast twitch muscles that they're doing, maybe they don't break their bone. Maybe they catch themselves and they're able to, not have to go to the ER.
Let's talk about this lactate. So the lactate is released into the body, and my understanding is that lactate is interesting in that it will cross the blood-brain barrier, and that I'm not a scientist. I know I'm going to get this wrong, but my understanding is that the lactate in the brain is used as a fuel, I believe, and will there's something called brain-derived neurofactor. Did I get that right? Neurotropic factor, yes, which is a good thing, which increases neuroplasticity. So do you have any data out there on doing this technique and its effect on cognitive abilities, on the brain, any of that?
Yes, we're at the very beginning of that. So not only are they doing it in Japan, because as you can imagine, with an aging population, their cognitive awareness is a huge issue. And concurrently, we've started work, not we, meaning not Kaatsu, independent researchers that work with the Department of Defense for all of the soldiers who are facing PTSD, depression, or had a traumatic brain injury. Maybe they were shot, maybe they had a blast injury, et cetera. And so what we do know is that as you described, as we increase the lactate, it goes up, it was communicated to the brain. The brain understands, and like you, I'm not a scientist, so I'm only repeating what I've been told by the scientists. And that is actually a very good thing when we actually create more BDNF, and we do it regularly. So not just once a week, and we do it in the cases of the soldiers or the older people in Japan who are actually need something like BDNF in order to maintain or improve their cognitive awareness, their ability. And as you and I know, unfortunately, we've got all kinds of, neurological diseases that are increasing, certainly in our country, and I believe around the world, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, et cetera. We want that cognitive function to at least not decrease. And we do that through a very simple manner. We actually use squeeze balls or a tennis ball or a wash rag, and we can basically work on our forearm. Our forearm is an easy muscle to build up lactate. You don't have to do much in order to build up lactate in your forearm because it's a weaker muscle as opposed to a bicep or tricep. So we can squeeze the ball quickly and slowly with the Kaatsu on. That leads to a very quick and significant increase in lactate. And you can do that if you're that 70-year-old or 80-year-old or 90-year-old pretty easily. And then they've got a significant amount of lactate that is, in their brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It somehow, and I don't know the exact science of what that mechanism is for BDNF to be produced, and I don't know exactly what the BDNF does practically. And I think the whole medical community is unfolding this wonder within our brain. But we do know that in the same way that we increase the elasticity of our vascular tissue in our quadriceps or calves, we're also doing the same in our brain. And therefore, you have all of these concurrent mechanisms in the body that I think day by day we're learning more. We meaning the medical community, we meaning civilians, the medical military community is learning more and more where we can actually, if this is the right word, where we can impact our brain optimally doing very simple exercises, including squeezing a ball with Kaatsu bands on.
So that's one systemic effect. Let's talk about a few others. What about these the metabolite, the things that are produced in metabolism that then build up in the muscle and then are suddenly released, and one of which is lactate, which seems like a good thing. There's probably some negative waste product there, which is then I guess shunted to the kidney. And how is the kidney deal with this under restriction? And is there any sort of kidney problem that is developed because of what we're doing here?
Yeah, we haven't. If you use Kaatsu correctly, meaning the right pressure for not multiple hours at end, and you have the pressure on, pressure off, you won't have these problems. However, if you do use some BFR bands, if you will, and you cut off enough blood flow, meaning the arterial flow, and you do lift up too much weight, then you can create very quickly an enormous amount of lactate, cortisol, other things that the body produces these things naturally. That is true. But when you get outside of a certain range, then it impacts different parts of the body. And you could get something like rhabdomyolysis and other things that you could be sent to the hospital. Now, with Kaatsu, you have to be a real masochist. I mean, you have to really push yourself for much longer than we would ever recommend, at much higher levels that we would ever recommend. And frankly, unless you're someone who really is intending to hurt yourself, it's almost impossible to create these levels of metabolites that would cause damage to any internal organs.
Let's talk about the cortisol.
Yeah.
So are we producing more cortisol than normal? And is it sustained? Is it metabolized? What happens here?
So for cortisol, it depends really what you're doing. And again, remember, we're doing Kaatsu. The capillaries are engorged in blood, and we're doing some movement. Now, there are many, many protocols within Kaatsu where you do no movement at all. And that would be someone who's post-surgery. That would be someone who had a concussion, traumatic brain injury, or other such things. There are many Kaatsu protocols where you just sit and you let the equipment do the movement. In the case where you have someone who's doing, I'll say intensely vigorous exercise, yes, you are producing cortisol. I haven't seen any data to say that if you do this amount of Kaatsu and you do this amount of non-Kaatsu, for the same amount of time, which one is producing more or which one is producing less. We haven't measured that because the amount of cortisol that is being produced isn't significant enough for it to be on our radar as a dangerous risk. And I say that with all the confidence because it's not only the research that has been done since 1995 in Japan to the present, but also we have research now that's being conducted all over the world. From the Harvard Medical School to the UC San Francisco Medical School. So there's a lot of research out there, not done by us, but done by others. We are aware of it, and they buy our equipment in order to conduct research. And quite often I see the IRB, the Institutional Review Board information, and certain issues are addressed there. But nobody, since I've been working, since 2001, has said something like cortisol is a significant risk factor when doing Kaatsu.
Okay. Let's talk about some other sort of interesting systemic effects. So in some of the papers that I read, bone density is increasing.
Yeah.
I don't understand this.
Okay.
Help me with this.
Okay. So the way that Kaatsu looks at the human body is we have capillary-rich organs, capillary-rich muscles, capillary-poor bones, and capillary-poor connective tissue, ligaments and tendons. And how we use the pressure and the time under pressure and the movements differ depending on what part of the body we're working on. Now, mostly we're working on the muscle, but in the case that we have injuries or we're just getting older, then we're looking at bone density or ligament. They could have a tear, a rupture, what have you. And so when we go from the capillary-rich body part to the capillary-poor body part, in general, on the capillary-poor body part, because it's more, it takes more effort to put the blood into the capillaries of the bone or the connective tissue. There are surface capillaries there. We have to go a longer period of time at a very gradual, very, very gradual increasing in pressure to a higher level than we would working with muscle. And when we go this very gradual, long, slow progress to a higher level, and we do body weight exercises, and body weight exercises could mean as something as simple as walking, but it also could be squats. It also could be some kind of isometric exercise where maybe I'm sitting and I'm trying to move or press my feet into the ground. In these cases, we have researchers who have published papers and gone into great detail why this is a alternative modality to help with people who have, let's say, osteoporosis, but even someone who had a compound bone fracture, for example.
So I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. We're talking about bone growth with very little load on the bone.
Or no load.
Or no load.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So then there are a couple other these fascinating systemic effects. One is the people are using Kaatsu, I guess, in Japan for facial muscles. Now, I'm not going to put a band around my neck. No. What? Tell me, what's going on here?
Yeah, so we call it Kaatsu beauty, and it's actually the biggest use of Kaatsu.
You're kidding me?
Yes,
really?
Yes, in Japan. Now, keep in mind that most users worldwide are females.
Really?
Most Kaatsu users are over the age of 50.
Okay.
And most of those users, a vast majority of those users are women.
Huh.
So when you imagine women over the age of 50, skincare, skin beauty is a very, very high priority, very high priority. So what we do, because it has systemic effects, and we proved this, I think it was back in 2005 or 6, the cardiologist produced a paper. What they did is, and that just very simply, they put Kaatsu around the legs of the female patients. They were all older females, and they did pressure on, pressure off. And then they measured the blood flow in their forehead. And they saw that the blood flow was increasing in the forehead. Then, entrepreneurs in Japan who were Kaatsu practitioners said, whoa, if I can do pressure on, pressure off of the bands on my legs, and I'm increasing blood flow in the face, the cheeks, the forearm, a whole industry took off, a whole industry. Now the protocols are not only put on the bands on the arms, but also on the legs, and then go through a series of exercises. Some of this very simple exercises is say the vowels, A, E, I, O, U, repeatedly, or smile. And even the Japanese have these like teeth things. You sort of grip and your jaw muscle is moving. as you have the Kaatsu bands on. And it is again, we're increasing the elasticity of the capillaries. And we all know, men, when we shave and we nick ourselves, blood comes out very easy. If a woman has some kind of accident, blood comes from her face very easily. We know that right under the surface of the face, you have all kinds of capillaries. And just like we're increasing the elasticity of the capillaries within the brain and in the forehead, as the doctors or scientists proved, we can also do so with the legs. It doesn't mean that wrinkles are magically going to go away. It simply means that the vascular tissue underlying the skin is more elastic. And so this is a huge thing there. I mean, I'll give you one more example. In Japan, when a woman will have her wedding day, they undergo a 7-day program with Kaatsu. And for 7 days, they go every day to these wedding preparation clinics where they do Kaatsu. And so the idea is on the 7th day, the bride is just glowing and makeup is easy and she's as beautiful as possible. And so in Japan, Kaatsu beauty is really a thing.
Wow. What about something else I read in the literature was about trunk muscles, which I guess this is sort of in the same ballpark. Talk to me about that. So
I think very few people like to do planks, crunches, ab work. I know I don't. But I do want a very strong core. I don't want a big belly. I want strong back muscles. And so what we do there is we put Kaatsu bands on the legs. We sit at the edge of our chair, as I'm doing right now, shoulders back, straight spine, and try to hold that position as the bands are going pressure on, pressure off, pressure on, pressure off. That's one exercise. The second exercise, again, something you can do in your office, your home, you put the bands on your legs, pressure on, pressure off, as you stand on one foot. And you stand on one foot, you can actually try it at your home or office, stand on one foot, and you feel your core tighten up. That's what we're trying to achieve. And the third exercise is simply put a book on your head and walk back and forth, shoulders back, straight spine, good posture, as good a gait as you can muster. And again, working on the core. And what happens is the stress is on the core. When you sit up versus slouching, when you're balancing on one foot as opposed to standing, when you're walking, trying to keep that book on your head, the core muscles of your abdomen and lower back are being stressed. And so the lactate is built up in the leg muscles because you have the leg band on. That's communicated to the brain. The brain releases a variety of hormones, and then it goes around the body and goes to the cells that have these receptors saying, hey, I'm under stress. And because your abdomen and core are under stress, that is where the hormones do their thing.
I hate side planks. They're like,
Well, you could do side planks if you want with Kaatsu. That'll get to the point directly. But if you don't want to, what I always tell people is if you're watching TV on your couch, it's not as comfortable as sitting back in the couch and sort of being one with the couch. But if you can sit up straight for that half an hour program with the bands on, take a picture of your core in the privacy of your own home, or ask your partner, your spouse to look at you 1 month later of doing that daily, and you will be shocked with the results.
Okay. Stephen, this is really quite something. I thank you so much for sending all of this literature and keeping me up for 3 nights reading all this. I have to say, we get a lot of stuff here that people tell us about. And when I got, this, when somebody, I have a couple of friends who told me about this, and I just thought, this is just like, nobody can make these kind of claims and this all be true. But I it's amazing to me. And I think it's something that I think that for a lot of people, I mean, they're like, kudos to like myself, like a semi-trained athlete, I think this is very useful for. But I think in general, people who don't like to do like what I do, but still want to keep their muscle, their bone, their brain, their cardiovascular system, or if they're injured, as I said, like joint replacement or something. I think this is really miraculous. I think it's something people need to know about.
Yes. I mean, it is very non-intuitive. It doesn't make sense.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. And I'm the first person to admit that. However, when you understand the underlying human anatomy and the fundamental physiology of the human body and understand what the body does in response to any kind of stress, in this case, an increase of lactate or an increase of an engorgement of working muscles, then it does make sense. And then the trick is, after it does make sense to you, figure out what you want to achieve. And somebody else in the world who has been a Kaatsu user has figured out the right the right movement, the right modality, the right time under pressure to achieve what you want to do. So it wasn't us at Kaatsu Global who came up with Kaatsu Beauty. It was actually estheticians. It was physicians, it was skin doctors, dermatologists, et cetera, who came up with this because they were seeing the results. And so, we now in the year 2023 have the advantage of this non-intuitive modality based on the human anatomy and human physiology. Somebody else has figured out the right mode to achieve what we want to do. So we're really quite fortunate where we are.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And if people want to spell Kaatsu is Kaatsu. Correct. Yes.
Kaatsu.com, and you'll have enough information. If there's a question out there or issue that you want to address, if there's some study that you heard about but you don't have exactly, just email us at info@kaatsu.com, and we'll provide you with that study, that independent analysis or conclusion that we've explained today. So, we welcome any question, any issue, and we'll address it through info@kaatsu.com.
Super. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
That was super interesting. Like I said in the beginning of the show, I've been using these for about 3 weeks, and it's just a very different way of exercising, of training. I don't think it replaces sort of normal training, but it's a fantastic adjunct to that. Or if you're recovering from an injury, or if you're a little bit older and you're concerned about losing muscle mass or bone density, I'm going to check these out. I think they're super interesting. Okay, so we're going to get with Just Try This in just a moment after a quick word from our sponsor. Today's show is also brought to you by Inside Tracker. Inside Tracker is the dashboard to your inner health. We talk about this a lot, about metrics, what matters, biomarkers. The thing is, you can't take actions on things that you don't know about, and what you don't know about can hurt you. I use Inside Tracker. I take their ultimate test 4 times a year. I look at their biomarkers. I see what's moving from quarter to quarter, so I can see if I've made changes in my program and my diet. Is there something that I need to adjust? And their food first, supplement second recommendations are great. I always share the results with my doctor, and if there's something we need to go over, we do that. Get a dashboard to your inner health. Go to insidetracker.com/ageist. Save 20% on all their products. This week on Just Try This, we know that hearing loss is associated with dementia, Alzheimer's, and general decline. But one of the other interesting things is, our other sense that maybe doesn't get enough attention is our sense of smell, our olfactory sense. And to keep ourselves, and this might sound a little strange, but one of the ways to keep your brain sharp is to keep that sense really active. And that involves smelling things. So smelling new things all the time. And, it doesn't mean you have to go nuts in the perfume department at the department store. But, when you're smelling spices, when you're smelling food, try and use your nose. Smell plants, smell the earth. All these things will help stimulate the part of your brain that processes smell, which is actually really important. So I know that there's a lot of flowers blooming. We've got a lot of roses out here in Park City. And, just stop for a second and, like they say, smell the roses. It'll be better for your brain and add a little joy to your life. So just try this. This is the time in the show where we ask you to do us a favor, which is please leave us a review. Please leave us a comment, a good one, hopefully. And if you really like us, you can share this show with some of your friends. Wouldn't that be awesome? Everyone, have a wonderful week. It's glorious late spring weather here, early summer weather, and I hope it's great where you are too. We'll see you next week. Take care now.